So in this session, we will see how operations management is seen from a systems approach. We have seen there are different perspectives of operations management, and systems approach is a very important view or a very important way of looking at how this entire OM system works. Now, what is a system? A system is a set of interrelated activities. A systems is something that makes use of some inputs to convert it into some outputs. So basically we are treating now operations management as a systems, and then we look at each element of this system one by one and understand how the entire functional area of operations management works. So let us understand the systems approach through a schematic diagram. We have discussed in the definition in our previous session that operations management is a function or a process of transforming inputs into outputs. Now, there are some entities which we call as inputs, and these inputs are converted into outputs. Now, how does this output come out? There has to be some changes, some attributes which have to be changed through a process, a transformation process. So the inputs which undergo a transformation process and then convert these inputs into outputs, and this output, now we cannot leave the transformation process as it is. At any point of time we need to have a recheck or a feedback or a control system to check whether we are going in the right direction or not. So we have a re-energizing process or a re-energizing control system which checks the output at various stages. Any deviations from what is set, it sends back the signal or it sends back the message communication at the input level so that corrections can be made, and again these inputs are now again passed through the transformation process to get the desired output. So this is a continuous loop here. The outputs are again measured, or outputs are again analyzed for any deviations from the standard or any deviation from the set standards. Especially when it's a physical good, we can always do this, but as we have already mentioned in our previous session, services it's difficult. But at least once you know that a particular customer was dissatisfied with a particular service, even though the service is over, in the next service you can change the pattern of the service so that the same customer comes again and again. That is, the same customer now says and comes and approaches you and says that yes, the feedback which he has given has been taken care of, and then whatever was lagging or whatever was the deficiency in the system, which you have rectified. So this is a very important approach in operations management, where the output is again analyzed, the feedback from the user, that is the customer, and customer usually gives his or her feedback about the system, and this feedback is taken into account and are again passed through the transformation process with the corrections so that the desired changes or the desired levels of satisfaction is achieved by the customer. Now, does this system work on its own, or are there any constraints on it? So if you can see here, there are just three inputs, three entities here: input, the transformation process, and the output. And there is a re-energizing system. The 4 units are there. Now, does this work isolated? Is it an isolated environment? No, it works in an environment. And what is that environment? Does it have any restrictions? Does it have any constraints? All organizations cannot work on their own. If that was the case, then every organization would have worked on their own way without caring the policies, without caring about the legal structure, without caring about the safety structures, etc. So there has to be a well defined boundary within which these particular systems work. So this block or this entire red line which you have seen, the outline, is the boundary of the system. So whatever inputs are transformed as a process into the output, and the re-energizing system actually acts in a controlled environment, in an environment which is bound by a boundary. And this boundary is very essential for proper running of the organization. Now anything in this system boundary, within this system boundary, is called the internal environment, and anything outside this system boundary is called the external environment. Now the external environment is much more larger in magnitude. So certain decisions required to be taken during the transformation process can be taken with liberty from the internal environment, whereas the external environment is an outside environment. That is these players or entities are outside the environment, so any changes in the external environment will affect the functioning of the operations management system. Similarly, internal environment also, employees might come in and go out of the organizations. New employees may come in, old employees may go out, some may be some may be retired, some may join some other company. So even the structure inside changes, keeps on changing, so that might affect the overall running of the system, but that is controllable within the environment. But whatever is outside, that is the external environmental factors, are very difficult to control. So this is the approach which is commonly employed to study operations management, to understand operations management. So we'll see what are the different entities that come in inputs, outputs, what is the transformation process, what all entities cover the internal environment, and what will come under the external environment. Now what are the inputs to the system? The inputs to the system are materials. We have seen inputs, materials, raw materials, materials which has to be processed and converted into outputs. Similarly, you have human resource, that is all the workers, employees, the staff, etc. Similarly, equipments, capital, working capital, very important. Similarly, energy for the administration as well as the operating facilities, both for administration, the office staff, as well as the production people who are working actually on the shop floor. You require energy, electricity, then you require water, you require all other sources through which your operations are run. Similarly, the management itself, the body which governs, makes policies, and which gives you the resources to carry on with the process. Similarly, information. In today's world, information is sharing information is very important, because everything depends on communication today. So the inputs, one of the inputs to the system is also information. Then money here refers to the initial investment is put in, but you need to generate money. As we have seen, one of the objectives was to minimize the outflow. One of the objectives of operations management, which we saw in the previous session, was minimizing the outflow. So money management is also very important. Now in materials, we have already seen the different materials which we discussed were the raw materials, the work in progress, and the finished goods. So these inputs have to be now reshaped or shaped into something, into outputs which are desirable, which are ready to be offered to the customer. So the process is also equally important. How we convert these inputs into outputs, that is equally important. We'll see the conversion process now, or the transformation process. Now, examples could be, we have seen materials, inputs. The inputs could be raw materials. Now, these inputs could be converted based on specifications into outputs, desired outputs, specified outputs through a machining process in a machining shop. Of course, today advanced automation, robotics are taking shape, so it could be manual as well as automated. So, machining process in machine shop could be one of the examples for transformation process. Next, medical treatment at a hospital. We discussed about tangible goods and intangible services. This is an example for service, medical treatment. See, the inputs in this case could be a person who is going to the hospital with a particular ailment or with a particular problem, saying that my health, doctor, my health is deteriorating. I am having a fever. Kindly give me a treatment. So that becomes the input to this system would be the patient. Now, what is the process? The process could be the entire step procedure of what the doctor or the medical intern there does, right from the point of checking, diagnosing, then making a treatment, giving a treatment, and again monitoring the after treatment phase, etc. So this medical treatment at a hospital is a conversion process or a transformation process that is happening in a service organization, namely a hospital. Is an example for that. Next, repair of equipments, faulty equipments, damaged equipments, malfunctioning equipments. Those are the inputs to a workshop or a repair shop. Now the process here is repairing of the equipments by the person who is repairing it, the serviceman. So similarly, generation of energy. We have an input in the form of, say, one source, for example water, hydel for example, hydel, similarly wind energy, tidal energy, etc., which are the inputs. Now you can generate electricity from it. The generation process of generation, the technicalities and all the other processes dealing with it come under the transformation process. Next comes service management. Service management is again a consultancy, for example, consultancy or legal advice. Sometimes you go for a legal advice, you go for a consultancy, etc., and all other event managements, etc., will come under this. Information processing, raw data is processed into useful communication or information. Newspaper industry, media, for example, or say you can even say that see some of the information, some of the raw data which we get need to be now processed. Some of them will be simply noise or simply unwanted data that you remove, and whatever is required, only those part you actually retain and deliver it to the person to whom you have to relay the information. That is the another example of transformation process. Chemical treatment. Next, these are just some, not these are not, there could be many more examples, but a limited number of examples for your understanding are listed here. Please note. Similarly, chemical treatment of chemicals to purify or to refine certain solutions or certain chemicals, that could be again a transformation process. And very important, what we are doing now, teaching learning process, another very important example for the transformation process. In a school or in a college, people aspiring to learn something, to learn some topics, they come in with raw idea, with raw minds. Of course all of you are very brilliant, but you require some guidance. So you require some guidance towards specialized or some focused topics. So what do, you now enroll into a particular college or a school where the faculty, the teaching staff, the non-teaching staff, etc., contribute towards your development process. So this becomes the teaching learning process, which is the another transformation process. What is the result of this? The result is given in the output. So inputs in this case, in this teaching learning process, could be students aspiring to learn something. They go through this conversion process of the teaching learning process. For example, people who are interested in learning OM come attend these sessions which are now offered. Now this particular session which is going on is the transformation process or the conversion process, where you are learning about the systems approach. And now after this process is over, you have gained some knowledge about operations management introduction phase. You have gained knowledge about what the objectives of operations management and what is the systems approach to management, operations management. That is the transformation process that is happening in you. Next, what are the outputs? Outputs are the machine products as per specifications. We saw the raw materials for the inputs. The machining process was the transformation process. What is the output? The output is the machined product as per specifications. Similarly, ill or unhealthy individual going to a hospital is the input. The medical treatment that the doctor gives is the transformation process. And what is the output? Output is the healthy individual after medical treatment. Similarly, equipment, a faulty equipment or a damaged equipment which goes to a repair shop is the input. The process of repairing it, technically, that is the process. And what is the output? The repaired equipment is the output. And similarly, energy generated, we have given the example. You can relate each of these outputs to the inputs and the process which you have listed earlier. The customer getting a service, similarly information, fully informed customer regarding rules and regulations, uninformed, an ignorant customer without knowing about rules and regulations is the input. The information desk is the process where the information person at the information desk gives information to the customer, that is the process. And what is the output? A fully informed customer regarding rules and regulations. Similarly, chemically treated product, similarly value added graduates from institutes, this is the output for the teaching learning process. So value added graduates from institutions and universities. So you can see here this model is applicable to almost all the operations that we can think about. Of course, the process is the heart. The inputs are converted into the process. Who does the process? The process, again, utilizing the resources. Without resources, nothing can be done. So these inputs which come as inputs are processed according to norms and specifications, according to the set policies of the internal environment, as well as which are guided by the external environment. See, for example, external environment in this teaching learning process, for example, it could be the MHRD or the AICT or the university, which also gives some which also formulates some regulations which we have to follow. So the external environment is equally important as the internal environment. And as the system boundary, the system boundary should be flexible. You cannot have a very rigid internal policy. Tomorrow you have a policy, organizational policy, but the government tomorrow issues a new directive. You need to change and adapt your internal policy according to what is given by the external, that is the government. So the boundary which an organization fixes for itself should be flexible for the improvement of the organization, for the well-being of the organization, the employees and the society. Let us move to the next slide. Now these are basically the examples which I already told you. So operation system, inputs, process and outputs. You can see here, if the operation systems, if I classify a steel plant as an operations system, the inputs are, of course, the iron ore, the coal, the coke, limestone, labor, machinery, etc. The process are the different smelting, rolling processes, etc. and various other processes. There are a lot of processes here. What are the outputs? Steel sections and sheets, etc. according to the specifications. So this is a tangible product. So whatever comes out, steel sections and sheets, tangible. You can see here, tangible. You can feel it, you can measure it. So steel section has a specification which you can judge, you can measure, and if it is not satisfactory, you can, if possible, send it back to the input and do the process again and get the desired sheet. Otherwise, if it is beyond repair, then it has to be scrapped or it can be reused for some other purpose. So that is an example for the steel plant. Next, automobile plant. Raw materials and components, labor, machinery. Raw materials, an automobile, a complete automobile, assembled automobile has different parts. Each part might have come from a different supplier. The entire supply chain could be, again, from the different parts of the country. Each one component could come from one producer, another one could from another producer, and so on. But at the same time, when all these raw materials are brought together and they have to be assembled now, so these raw materials now become the inputs. The fabrication of the parts, yes, in-house, if you are doing any fabricated parts in-house. If you are doing that, is a process. Even the assembly becomes a process. Parts which are procured from external vendors, you have to still assemble them. Parts you have got, but you have to assemble them. That becomes a process. And what is the output? The finished automobile. The finished automobile is the output. Now coming to the environment part. Now if we look here very carefully, now do you think that all these inputs, process and outputs are simply dependent on the internal environment? No, they are also dependent on the external environment. Now the demand for a particular automobile tomorrow goes down drastically because of customers' preferences. Customers' preferences are always changing. Say, ambassador car was very popular, no, say some 25, 30 years back, or even before that, and even before that, when we were all young, ambassador cars were considered as the most sturdiest of cars, the most robust of cars. Now ambassador is nowhere. So you can see new brands are coming up. That too, new brands which keeping they are evolving and keeping on changing based on customer expectations. Mobile phones, every year a new model comes out with new features. So you can see nothing is temporary. Everything is here. What happens is nothing is permanent here. It's going on changing, evolution, new innovation demands new innovation, pushes the old products outside and new things come out. So here when I say the external environment, the customer preferences, customers are a very important part of the external environment. The demand of the customers actually dictate what you are offering to them. So very important aspect of this external environment is the customers. So these customers and also government policies and also the market conditions and also the economy of the country. Economy, see this pandemic now, of course we are now coming out through that phase. So this situation is a very challenging phase for us, but we have all come out of it. Now that has uh, again affected some of the industry, some of the sectors, especially the manufacturing and automobile plants. But that is not the end of the day. Things will come up. Everyone will come back. Will get up and push forward. So there are different factors which affect these systems that you have to understand. Next, oil refinery, crude oil, equipment, labor, etc. These are the inputs. The chemical processes, they are the processes which convert this crude oil into the desired petroleum products. Now let's come to a service industry. So far whatever we have discussed, steel plant, automobile plant and oil refinery are all tangible products. Now restaurant, for example, hungry customers, chefs, services, equipment. What are the processes? Cooking and serving food. What is the output? Satisfied customers. You can see here even services are included. Even the service systems follow the systems approach here. Similarly, supermarket, customers with needs, the salesperson, staff, they are the inputs. Selling and retailing, and satisfied customers are the outputs. College or university, students enroll for learning, the teaching learning process is the process. Value added graduates are the outputs. Airlines, aeroplanes, pilots, engineers, staff, etc. Air transportation is a process, and it's not very simple. It's not just one activity. Air transportation, there are too many aspects in that. There are control measures, all the transportation, all the customers need to be taken care of. All the customers will not be satisfied. You have to individually, 1:1, you have to attend each customer and try to satisfy him or her, so that the entire process is successful. So here again, satisfied customers reaching their destinations, that becomes the output. So you can have various examples of the systems approach, and this systems approach makes you understand the concept of operations management easily. So this is a very important approach to operations management, and we'll be we'll be referring to this time and again in our subsequent slides. Let us see the different entities in the external environment. Customers, of course, the backbone of any organization. It's the customers who actually initiate a particular product, initiate the generation of a product. The first need or the requirement of a particular product actually comes from the customers, and based on the customer's need, the customer's requirement, the product is designed. Similarly, competitors are always inevitable. Competition is inevitable, competitors are unavoidable. So competitors, you have to take care of the competition, so you have to have a flexible policy in combating the competition. So similarly, suppliers or vendors, goodwill amongst suppliers in the long run will only help you whenever you are short of demand. If you are in the good books of the suppliers, they will always help you. And similarly, the suppliers, the proximity of the suppliers is also another very important point. Nearness to the supply points. So your location, as far as uh, possible, no, you need to have your supply base as close to you. That is another point. Next, government regulations and policies. Technology becomes obsolete very fast nowadays. So new technologies, old technology goes, new technology comes. So this technology is also another very important factor which impacts the functioning of the organization. Economy again, it could be a natural disaster, or it could be a pandemic, like now what is happening now. Of course, now we are out of it, and I want to believe that we are out of it. Let us pray to God. Next, economy. Next, society. Societal concerns. Societal concerns, again, this society, whenever you set up an organization or a unit, the society sometimes also has something to say in the running of your organization. Now, say environmental pollution. Now, if the environmental pollution, who is going to affect by, say, environmental pollution that is generated from one organization? The society, the people living nearby the factory or nearby the unit. So societal concerns, employment, giving employment to society. And similarly, society might demand something from the organization. So, and as a goodwill measure, companies sometimes involve in the corporate social responsibility domain. So they need to now look at society as also one of the major players in the external